Hi. I'm on the floor, wrapped in like too many blankets. I don't know why, but I started reading my first book today. Actually, I do know why. Just as a backstory, when I was in Montreal in June, I met up with this woman who is probably one of the book's biggest fans, bigger than me for sure. And she took me out for lunch and then listened to all my everything I had to say. Bought some books off me, and then very calmly asked me if I had read The Love Mindset lately and suggested that it could help me. And I walked away being like, I wrote it. What are you saying? But that has kind of haunted me ever since, and I've thought like, hey, read it. Should I read it? And then there's been these people asking me to make an audiobook of it. I mean, I published it like 6 years ago. So to me, reading something that I wrote 6 years ago is borderline traumatizing because I've improved as a writer since then. I know I have. And there's going to be things that I notice that I would change now. And so wanting to change something that's in the past, I mean, it feels a lot like, looking in the mirror and being like, oh, just this, augment this, augment this, augment that. It's a really slippery slope for me. And I can so easily end up on the floor wrapped in a bunch of blankets. So my theory right now is that if I'm already battling my mind, why not? And so then I started reading it, and I was like crying within the first few pages. So I wanted to share this moment. Also, story when I was in LA. So that was early December. I get this message from somebody who's like, "Are you in Bakersfield, California? I saw it in your Facebook story or in your Instagram story." And I was just taking a road trip from Vancouver to LA. I was in Bakersfield for like a few hours. And he says, I just read your first book like 3 times, and I'm about to post a review of it on YouTube, and I want to know if you want to meet up for lunch. And so we meet up for lunch, and then he starts saying things like, this book is the entire truth of everything, just things that I'm sitting there being like, is it though? Is it? And yeah, so I've had some experiences in the past week that have been, I guess for no better word for it, like extremely spiritual. And so that's been one of the things that's kind of led me back to this book. Um, yeah. And I think I woke up this morning feeling uh, like there was something missing, if that makes sense. And I've been so motivated and so determined lately, and then I just wake up in the morning and I'm like, what is it? What is it that's missing? And I can feel like it is my mind, and something just drew me back to the love mindset. It is so weird to read your own work after not reading it for so long. Also very weird that I'm choosing to do this on video. Yeah. But I'm going to do it. I'm doing it right now. Okay. This is the preface. If someone would have told me years ago that I would be writing a book about love, more so a spiritual one, I would have taken it as a joke. The message in the love mindset is not one that has arisen out of some religious conditioning or a lifetime pursuit in some discipline. The pages of this book contain lessons about love, born from the fruit of my personal transformation that occurred after years of cynicism, self-loathing, and isolation. I have learned about love like our ancestors as nomadic creatures once learned about agriculture. I have found abundance simply through a lifetime of hunger, and now, if you would kindly invite me into your heart and mind, I would like to share with you what I have found to be perhaps the most important thing that any person can learn. For most of my life, there were only a handful of things I had under control. I excelled at school, I had a way with words, and I knew how to convince people I was right. I spent my time talking about things as if I knew something about them, while slowly poisoning myself with anything I could get my hands on. The more it hurt, the more control I felt I had. I was spiraling blindly, armed with the power of shame-fueled judgment and an arsenal of memories that I packaged conveniently into a story. All in all, I was a master of self-destruction, arrogance, and playing victim. When it came to love, I always fell short. Like most 21st century women, I spent most of my life hating my body. I desperately wanted to be beautiful and hated myself because I thought I wasn't. As an adult, I spent most of my hard-earned dollars removing, covering, altering, augmenting, decreasing, increasing, extending, reducing. I cycled in and out of eating disorders for close to 10 years. When it wasn't food, it was some other self-altering obsession. I lived in a constant state of complete self-rejection. My overriding goal was to be someone I wasn't. I wasn't sure who exactly I wanted to be, but certainly not myself. I changed my hair, my face, my body. I tried to turn myself into someone other people would respond to with awe or envy. I wanted women to want to be me and men to want to be with me. I wanted to be desired and admired. I spent years crafting the perfect mask, the perfect disguise, the perfect identity. Strutting down the street, I would exude an air of what I thought was confidence, but now I realize only looked like shame. Underneath my carefully concealed face lay the hideous monster of self-loathing. That monster knew the facade wasn't real. Every compliment for the mask was translated by the monster. Every bite of approval was digested into the idea that my real, authentic self was ugly. Every ounce of praise only added to the heaping pile of proof that I needed to cover myself up. Every time someone said, "You're beautiful," I'd hear, "You're ugly, keep concealing." Every time someone said, "You're so great to be around," I'd hear, "You're boring, keep lying." Each compliment for the mask was a blow to my core. I, however, didn't see the mask. All I saw was person after person who failed to make me feel loved. The years before the mask were even worse. As a young girl, I would compare myself to every woman I saw. Was she prettier, skinnier, more attractive? I would watch Jennifer Aniston on television and feel my thighs sink into the couch as I either ate or starved myself to death. It didn't matter if my stomach hurt from hunger or from gluttony. Either way, I still wasn't her. I still wasn't perfect. Throughout every show and every commercial break, envy would pour through me, hot and sickening. In public, it was even worse. At least with TV, I could fool myself by saying they stretched the screen or used technology to edit the women's bodies, but in real life, I couldn't hide behind those assumptions. Envy would bubble and burn within me like a violent chemical reaction spilling all over my organs. Some days, it felt physically painful living inside my skin. The worst, however, the absolute worst, was facing my reflection. Often I would avoid it at all costs. Other times I'd stare purposefully, silently, shouting insults at myself for every imperfection. My relationship with myself is the most verbally abusive relationship I've ever had. One June afternoon in my late teen years, I had my first eye-opening experience. Like most life-changing shifts in awareness, my first glimpse bred only confusion, not insight. It took years before I understood what really happened that sticky, humid afternoon. That Sunday, just like every other Sunday, my parents corralled me into their purple minivan with its nauseating leather in the sunlight stench and set off to the shopping mall. We weaved in and out of stores, my parents discussing the optimal amount of racks in a toaster oven while I wished myself invisible. We ended up in a large department store, navigating the bottom floor with its lemon-scented tiled walkways, lined by square, floor-to-ceiling poles with mirrors on all sides. Department after department, I tried to keep my head down, and my thoughts focused on avoiding the cracks in the tiles. Really, I was avoiding the silent judgment I felt radiating powerfully from the other shoppers. There I was, gliding awkwardly through the perfume department when I looked up and saw a girl who immediately triggered that burning, raw envy. Like a shot of straight whiskey, it came down hard and washed its hot sickness into every part of my core. As she walked toward me, I eyed her skinny thighs and perfect breasts, wishing I had what she had. If only, I thought, if only I could have a body like that. Why can't I have a body like that? She came closer. I felt my heart beating faster as I imagined her eyes drilling through my enormous, unshapely frame, silently thanking her creator that at least she didn't look like me. My face reddened. I felt my tense limbs surrender in helplessness. I just wanted it to stop. I just wanted to be her and to stop being myself. I wanted to jump right out of my ugly, disgusting skin and settle into her comfortable, beautiful body. And only when I was about to walk headfirst into the mirror did I realize that it was me. I envied myself. Confused and shocked, I walked out of the store in a strange daze. I didn't understand what happened, though I thought about it compulsively for weeks on end, trying to decode the message. After a while, my confusion faded as the intensity of the experience wore off, and I settled back into familiar, self-deprecating patterns. For some time, I considered that maybe it wasn't necessary for me to hate myself so much. As the initial shock wore off, however, I excused the incident as an illusion, an accident, a trick of the eye. Less than half a decade later, I was unrecognizable. My hair had gone from my natural light brown to pitch black. My face was lathered in makeup, my skin infused with metal and ink. I no longer felt things like embarrassment or shame. I felt only cold distance and judgmental superiority. That self-hating girl never healed. I just pushed her down, telling her I'd keep her safe by donning a protective shield. Behind the mask, I lived in an armored fortress surrounded by several armies with cannons and guns. I was miles away from civilization, paranoid, cold, and hiding from the dangers that lay out there. I didn't feel pain, but I also didn't feel joy. I didn't love anyone, and I didn't love myself. I felt only a dark, gaping void that became larger each year while I tried to stuff it with anything I could find. I pumped myself full of knowledge and money, philosophy and power, chocolate and chemicals. I would get into relationships and bare myself for just a moment, but then I'd retreat. In my trigger-happy, isolated fear, I drove away everyone who tried to love me, and then blamed it on them. There were times when I would look at myself in the mirror and see something hiding behind those judgmental, cold eyes. Something innocent, pleading. Anytime I tried to access that part of me, it got ugly, fast. Each attempt to bypass my own self-defense mechanisms came with a barrage of painful memories, self-destructive thoughts, and so much pain that I could hardly move. So, I drowned it out. I ran into every pair of open arms and into the embrace of every vice. My mask, like every mask eventually must, began to split. Though I filled in the cracks as well as I could, my true self was suffocating, blue-faced, and gasping for air. The more I covered up, the harder she fought to get out. I didn't understand what was happening. I felt a war going on deep inside me. My inner self, like a caged animal, threatened to either burst out or destroy everything within. I began to contemplate suicide in between bouts of self-destruction. Like a tornado, my self-hating thoughts and traumatic memories tore through me, sucking me deeper to where I dared not go, leading me to a place I would later call my mental breakdown, my rock bottom. A point came when I knew suddenly and concretely that I had to make a choice. Change or die. For hours I sat on my bedroom floor contemplating this choice. Like Hamlet, I weighed the pros and cons of ending my life. Somehow I found a shred of hope, a dose of strength I didn't know I had. I chose to change. As I let go, the self-loathing I had been burying within me burst out and tore through every muscle in my body. Exhausted and blinded by pain, I went to bed. Nothing could have prepared me for what came next. The following day, I tried to carry on as usual, but I couldn't. I sat down to do my makeup, but my hand wouldn't move. I stared at myself, my face bare, naked. I realized for the first time that mask or no mask, I hated myself, so why was I covering up? Who was I covering up for? If I was going to hate myself anyway, I thought I might as well just hate my real self, so I took out all my piercings. I left the makeup in the bag. I stripped the color out of my hair. As I removed each layer of external protection, my disgust at myself persisted. I began to realize that this battle within me did not originate from my eyebrows or my thighs. It came from my mind. It came from my thoughts about myself. In the weeks that followed, years of repressed self-hatred pumped through my veins as I faced my bare reflection in the mirror. Everything from the pigment of my skin to the color of my eyebrows screamed obscenities at me. I surrendered. I took the screams like inner blows, allowing them to penetrate me. For the first time in years, I didn't drown out my feelings or cover them up. I just let them happen. And then I went on with my day. For weeks, I became gradually weaker and weaker. Taking those beatings from myself was hard, and at the time, I wasn't sure that it would all be okay. I just knew I had to do it. The inside of my mind became a horror film. All the walls, gates, and blocks I had put up against my thoughts were down. I had no protection from the ghosts of my past or the shadows of my psyche. The truth felt like a jagged little pill, a cruel poison. I drank it down, and no matter how much I cried or screamed, I kept coming back for more. One day, 3 or 4 weeks after my fateful breakdown, I came in front of the mirror with my head down. I approached like this so I could relax before I looked. I wanted to make sure that I didn't brace myself against what would come. I didn't want to fight it. After all, I'd been fighting for so long. Though I felt weak, I took a deep breath, relaxed my shoulders, and looked up into the eyes of the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen. At that moment, I suddenly remembered that one day at the department store, the only other day I'd ever seen anyone like her. I've never cried like I cried that day. And then there was peace. There was beauty, love, and quiet, beautiful peace. For the first time in my life, there was silence. I knew something had changed. My mind had changed. My eyes had changed. I went out that day onto a busy train and felt like I was on a magical, magnificent universe. I looked at the faces of all the strangers around me, and they were just so beautiful. Every chin, collarbone, and wrist, every shape, size, race, and gender, I was surrounded by dozens of beautiful, brilliant creatures. Among them, there was no ugliness and no mediocrity. Everyone was transcendent. I had never lived in such a world with such people. I realized early on that I was experiencing love, but I had no idea what love was. For a long time, I couldn't understand what happened that day or how to hold on to it. I would get that feeling and then I would lose it. I would love myself and then I'd come crashing down. I'd have moments of peace and then I'd feel the war coming on again. I'd search for that feeling in my relationships with others, but the harder I looked, the less I found. This was the second part of my journey, an exploration into the meaning and nature of love. I wanted to know what had happened to me and how I could give that experience as a gift, not only to myself, but also to the world. This is how the love mindset was born. Its conception came after a long, transformational journey. On that path, I realized that my struggle with love, both for myself and others, had nothing to do with love's availability. It had nothing to do with me either. It had nothing to do with how many pounds I weighed or whether the man across from me thought my cheeks were too big. The crucial thing about love is not me or him, you or them, today or tomorrow. The answers to love I found lie in the mind. The questions about love I also found exist within all of us. Yet we're so afraid to ask that we just settle for the answers we're given. I hope that reading this book will be as enlightening for you to read as it was for me to write. I feel honored and privileged to be invited on your journey of healing and happiness. If you, like me, have run dry searching for love in romantic relationships and searching for peace in the darkness of your vices, then I'm glad we found each other. Thank you for choosing me to show you the truth of who you are and what you're capable of. I'm excited to share with you some insight into why you've been suffering, what love is, and how you can finally live the life you want. I started somewhere in the very early stages of this process, the process that I talk about in that book. I started dating my ex. The book is dedicated to him. And he was the one that encouraged me to write it, and I had a lot of his support in those early stages. And then there was no support. And it was just hard. And I think for a really long time I knew that my spiritual journey had been kind of interrupted by being in a relationship that wasn't serving me. And it's weird to be back. It's weird to read my own words and just feel so invited back. Sometimes, I've got so much hair in my mouth. Sometimes I just feel like I write these things for me, all the stuff that I ever write, I write it for me so that I can understand the world, so that my mind is not this crazy buzzing place, and so I can just get some peace through the creation of something beautiful that captures what it is that I'm going through. And like, it's actually really well written. Like, I don't really want to change anything. Like, I changed a few things actually when I was reading it just to make it more like, but it's so easy to look back at who I've been in every single state and just be so hard on myself for who I've been and think that I'm better now, and at the same time expect better from myself. And then if I ever see traces of my past self in anything that is happening in the moment, then I just feel like I've regressed completely. And it's so powerful to remember how I'm not the same. And it's really humbling to realize some of the ways that I am. And, I something else that this person in Montreal said is that she got in a debate with somebody that the love mindset is like the best book of all time and that it's better than the Alchemist, which, like, I think the Alchemist is like the most beautiful book ever created. Like, there's so much magic in it. I don't really feel like any self-help book could ever measure up to what The Alchemist was. But this is her opinion, and she said, when you talk so highly about, like, your second book and then you just kind of cast your first book aside, you're being really hurtful to those of us that really love your first book. And that made me realize that this book has its own relationships with people. It's like, I don't have any children, but this is like how somebody might relate to a child. You have to let go. You have to let go of who you think that person is and just let them live their own life. And I realized at that moment that, wow, like, these books have separate existences and I just have to let them have whatever existences they're going to have. And what I'm realizing right now is that I have put The Art of Talking to Yourself on a pedestal because it took me 4 years to write it. And I really wanted to take time to make it, to perfect it and craft it and, edit it and then leave it and then edit it and then leave it and just be able to come back to it and say, okay, I'm not changing anything else. Because that was one of the problems with the thing that I perceived to be a problem with the love mindset was that it had been written so fast. Like, as soon as I realized that that's what I needed to write about, it spilled out in less than 6 months. And I should have gone through my own editing process with it more before just hiring an editor. And I did learn that every single writer needs to take their work, let it sit, take their work, let it sit. Like, no editor is going to replace your own eyes, because that's you sculpting your masterpiece. That's you crafting your masterpiece. Like, nobody can do that for you. You can't just interrupt that process halfway through or 3/4 of the way through and have somebody else take over because you're afraid to keep working on it. And so that definitely happened. And I was so critical of that process because I had learned to edit. I had learned to edit the way that I want to edit. And so I had kind of always looked down on the process of conception for the love mindset. But what I'm feeling right now is that, like, when something comes out that fast, that's like channeled, like, it really felt like it was coming from somewhere beyond me. And it was difficult to admit that was happening because I was still such a cynical human being. And I think I still am in some way. Like, as I said in my last social media post, I've been talking to God. And every time I say that, it, like, gets my hackles up because I'm like, what are you doing? What are you doing saying that? So it's hard for me to admit when these things are happening. which I have to really respect, because if I'm willing to accept every single other explanation except for a spiritual experience, like anything else, like I can go through and say, maybe this is happening, maybe this is happening, maybe this is happening, but it's like, when a truly cynical and skeptical mind has a spiritual experience and cannot deny that it's anything else, there's something really beautiful about that. And I hated so much of the Love Mice. I hated the authentic edition. There's these 96 copies of it out there that is one of the earliest edits. And they have these, like, stickers on them. I think I only have maybe 2 of them left, and one of them my mom has. So they've all been, like, bought up or given away. And I felt really weird about this edition because it had been edited since then, but, right now I'm kind of like, maybe I want to read that edition, maybe I want to read what it actually was, because, yeah, it's cool to edit, and it's cool to be, like, an artist, and to seek perfection, and to seek expression, like the ultimate expression of your craft. It's cool to work on your craft, but it's also cool to just, like, be humble to the process of something coming through you and respecting what it is that's coming through you, like respecting it when, like, God shows up and talks through your body, and not being embarrassed of how what that entity has to say differs from what you as a human being might want to say, might think you want to say. So, yeah, I think I'm going to make this audiobook. I'm in Melbourne right now, and there's somebody here who has a recording studio who's been really disproportionately generous with me. And all the tools are here. There's enough time. There's a studio. There's me. The most important part, there's me finally wanting to read this book. To the person in Montreal. I'm not going to say your name. But you know who you are. Thank you. I mean, thank you. It's very humbling to know that, that you saw this coming. Okay, I'm gonna stop crying on camera now. I love you guys. Thanks for being here for all 33 minutes. Wow. I think I'm gonna make this video 33. How about that? Okay. Just for fun. I love you. Thank you.